So I needed to make this video. It's been bothering me the last probably few days. And I was thinking, you know, my biological father. And I could be wrong about this. It could, because this guy looks a lot like my biological father, but he's just like shorter and he's chubbier. And I want to say one day I was a little kid, and I think I remember standing on the front porch, and I saw my biological father walking from two houses down where I grew up, next door to Ivan's. Next door to Ivan's is a woman. I don't. There used to be a guy by the name of Joe that used to live there. He was an old man, really old man with like a mole on his face, and he would always come by like once every, you know, once a month, once every 4 or 5 months to say hello to my dad. And and my dad was just kind of just a really hermit and didn't really like making friends. And at least especially for some reason, this guy, I don't know why, I don't know if it was just before or after, he just really didn't care. Anyway, Julian knows who this guy is. But anyway, I recall that this lady, this lady is relatives. This check this out. This lady is relatives with my dad's first wife. Okay, my dad's first wife, she died of emphysema, and I've talked about the story so many times because my dad used to share her death and her experiences he had and the tragedy with me hundreds of times. Okay, and he was sort of always playing this sad violin to me about her death and how she died in our arms, and like what they call like the death rattle or something, like when someone is about to pass away, there's like a last jolt that someone does for life before they pass. And anyway, so this lady, this woman was who passed away. She was relatives with this lady that lived two houses down from us. I don't know how, she's like a distant cousin, I want to say, on my dad's side, but or his, well, I want to say his wife's side, which her name was Sarah. Her name was Sarah as well, just like Sarah Cooper. And they lived two houses down, and right next door to my sister who passed away, who had Down syndrome. And I don't know what related, but my mother used to always tell me this. She's like, oh, it's just, I don't know, I can't remember her name, but my mom used to always bring her up. Never said any bad. She just kind of like, oh, just let them be. Just kind of, that's how my mother was. She was like, oh, that's just, I look nice. Like, I leave him in peace. That was it. But I just knew it was all weird because my cousin, or like my dad's like niece or his wife, his wife was related to that lady that lived there, the homeowner, and she was a Mexican lady, heavy set. And as a matter of fact, I talked to her about 7 years ago. And anyway, there used to be this light complected girl. She's like a white girl, but she grew up Mexican sort of lifestyle. She's really, really white, and she looks like a white girl. I mean, whiter skin than a lot of white people, like pale skin. And very beautiful. Like, she's very pretty. Like a lot of guys. And Robert Zarate used to actually talk to her many years ago, and I knew friends that did. I was really shy and I never said anything to her, but I always kind of looked at her in high school when I was in school, and she always knew who I was. She had long hair, she colored hair blonde, and had brown eyes. But she looks like a white girl. She doesn't look Mexican. But she grew up in a Mexican household. But I never communicated with her. And I just knew information about her from what my mother told me, is that she started to act like a nuisance when I was a kid, and she got in trouble with like court and all kinds of other shit. And I don't know what this, I don't know what the situation was with what was going on, but she was getting involved with some boys and some other shit that was going on. But she wasn't a terrible girl. She really wasn't. She just, being a teenager. And So throughout my whole life, I never went over there. I never knocked on the door. It was kind of weird that, but my mother always kind of just like, oh, I just leave him in peace. No, yo no voy para allá. Yo lo dejo en paz. But anyway, that's the statement about that house. But my biological father, I want to say I was a little kid and I saw this guy, my biological father, talk to this guy. And this guy that there was a guy that it was a male guy that used to live there that looks a lot like my biological father. He looks, but he's sort of chubby. He looks like a chubby healthy, like a chubby but a healthy chubby, just like kind of meaty a little bit, but like a healthy and very rich black hair, and it looks kind of like my biological father, but he's just shorter. He's short, and anyway, I knew this guy because he used to work wearing, I think, jean. He used to wear the same outfit as my biological father did, because the only times I ever saw my biological father was when he's always wearing solid pairs of jeans and like working boots and like a dress shirt. Not like a dress shirt, but like a t-shirt or a polo shirt, like he worked in some sort of factory or required steel toe boots. And I knew this guy was wear steel toe boots. My mother used to tell me, oh, that guy makes really good money. And I don't know what the situation is. It makes me think, I think I remember my mom saying, because my mom had such a weird way of explaining things, how my biological father, whoever it was, throughout my life. But I want to say I saw him walking down this, was talking to this guy, and this is crazy because I talked to that guy. I talked to that guy. Gosh, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. I went over there just to knock on the door to try to get answers, not knowing any of the information I'm telling you. I just knew that maybe I should knock on the door, any answers about my dad and mom or what happened with the house. And they knew nothing. They just told me they were moving out of the house. But I talked to this guy and he said, no. And he looked at me like he knew who I was. Like he knew who I was because I was just a kid that lived 2 houses down. I was always that kid. But I want to say that I saw this guy talking to my biological father when I was a kid. And they were wearing the same clothes. So I think they worked together at some point. For some short period of time, I think they worked together. I could be wrong. Maybe I didn't see him, but I think it's worth looking into. I could be wrong. I'm kind of sketchy on this. I'm like 50-50 to think I remember him walking from over there to the house because he come over to my house. He came over to my house a couple of times, and it was just kind of like a booty call, and my mother invited him. And I just remember particularly this one time, I don't think he had a car with him. I think he was maybe walking. I don't know if he had a car with him. It was so long ago. But that was it. But I've been thinking, I was like, I think it's very possible. It's worth looking into. I'm really scared. I'm like 50-50 that I remember seeing him over there. And he worked with it, I think, that guy. Because it would make sense. Back in the 80s, when people got into relationships and people ended up having, their intimacy or booty calls or how it worked, there wasn't cell phones. You entirely had to depend on people and navigation this way. Navigation and traveling information traveled very differently. Times were very different. But I think it's worth I think it's worth anyone to look into. He could have, man, I don't know, it's sketchy. But anyway, God rest her soul, and her family. I talked about this in another video many years ago. But she knew Robert. Robert used to go over there one time. And one time I called Robert. A long time ago, I called Robert at her house. And he was fucking running. He was like, oh shit, he knows I'm fucking his sister. He knows I'm sleeping with his cousin. And he knew that I probably wouldn't. Because it was so funny because this relationship that I had with Robert Zarate was like no other friendship. Because we were always, for some reason, every time I was with him, we were always chasing girls. Like he was so good with women. And he was so goofy looking. And he had a weird way of catching people's attention. It was just very odd. People were always very odd of him, but he had such a natural goofy presence to him when he got into any environment. And but he knew, and he didn't say anything, and he disappeared. I remember for like a couple weeks, or no, like a month, and he was just avoiding me because I saw him like leaving the house, or I didn't see him leaving the house, but I saw him running, and I waved at him, hey, but I didn't know that he could have been over there. But he had told me later that he went to our house a couple of times. He's like, oh, we just talked for a couple of times. I don't know, you know. Anyway, you know, somehow she had gotten in contact with Robert, so she knew Robert Zarate, and I think she showed up to the funeral at Robert Zarate's. But she's a very beautiful girl, very, very, very pretty. And if you would, she used to go to an all girls school, Catholic school, and because I used to see her in her, you know how like you know, you see those Catholic schoolgirl outfits, Cub Scout girl outfits that kind of wear those skirts, their uniform. She used to go to a school like that where it was an all girls school. So when she went to this all girls school, I used to see her get out of the car, and I remember her growing up as a kid. Every time I would be outside, I see her getting out of her house, but I never saw her play out in the front yard. I never saw her play outside, really. I see later down the road, I started to see her, a couple of her friends sort of go to her house, some other girlfriends, but that was pretty much it. But she'd always give me these googly, girly kind of laughs as I was walked through high school and middle school. But I never talked to her, and I told Richard before, yes, it's my cousin. And, you know, they were always kind of in shock. Oh, you got a white person in your family or something that's related to you? But you can always see that look on their eyes, like, oh, you're part of the white community too? You know, like, you know, but anyway, I recall, I want to say seeing him, like talking to him, and they were out in the sidewalk, front porch, but I don't know. But anyway, I went there about I heard about, I don't know when this was. This was about 15 years ago. It was like 10 to 15, you know, it was over 10 years ago. Just about 10 years ago. No, it was over 10 years ago. 10 to 15 years ago at least. And I saw online that she had died. She died of a drug overdose. She ended up taking a bunch of pills or something like that and dying. And she passed away. And she had a couple of children. And I remember seeing this photo. Of Robert Zarate. I'm telling you, there's a photo of a kid. Now, this is why I believe that Robert Zarate had a child, possibly. You know, I don't know if people thought he was gay or not. I know he wasn't, because I'd seen him be around women too many times, and like, if there's just no way. I know he wasn't intentionally bisexual or anything. He wanted women without a doubt. Anyway, and I recall seeing this photo like 5 years ago. I was going through her photo or her Facebook, and I saw this photo, of this kid, of her son. I think it's her son, and it says, I want to say her son, and he looks exactly like Robert Zarate. I'm talking about looks like the same skin tone, hair, same body structure. There is no doubt in my mind that guy had to have been Robert Zarate's kid. And And I recall thinking to myself, like, did Robert Zarate have a kid with her and didn't know? And look, let me tell you this. This is why I think of this too. Many years ago, I was about 14. I was 15. I don't think could have been 16, but I was about 15 years old, and I was on a bicycle. And Robert had a weird way of saying shit. And I was on his pegs on his bicycle. No, I was giving him a ride. I think I was giving him. I don't know. One of us were piggy. What do you not piggyback ride? Yeah, we're piggyback riding or some shit, or right on the handlebars on his bicycle. And we're on his bike riding down Daniel Box's alley. We're going down toward my house. And he told me, and he says he was very nervous that he got Margie pregnant. And he says that uh, that either she had a miscarriage. I remember him saying that he thinks that he had a kid with her and that she had a miscarriage of his child. And he said he was nervous. He said he's had that on his mind all. He goes, I think Margie had a miscarriage of my kid. And I was about 15 years old. Robert Zarate was sexually active very young. And he built very fast, very tall. But he told me this. And I remember he used to always be sketchy because I forgot who it was that told me. Either Robert told me or someone told me that he had sex with my cousin. Robert Zarate did. He had sex with my cousin, which was that girl that lived 2 houses down. Because I used to always see her. I don't know how she got involved in it, but girls have a way to contacting guys. She ended up somehow Robert going over there, and even some of the other Mexican friends I knew who she was, like Turtle, Armando, back in the hood, and they lived in some apartments. But I don't know how they knew who she was, but she knew who they were. So anyway, I think it's really sketchy, and she ended up passing away, but it was about 5 years ago, maybe more. Yeah, it was about 5 years, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that I went over to that house. And when I went over there, that lady that was my dad's, Sarah Palomo's cousin, lived there the entire time. They lived in that house for like 45 years. And not only did they live there, but when I went there, they were literally had a U-Haul truck. There was like a guy. There was some guy or two that were all loading up the furniture and everything into the truck, and she was out there sitting on a porch, right there in the driveway, the little small garage, sitting on a chair, just chilling. Cause she used to sit outside and just chill outside. Just some people are kind of claustrophobic and need to just be sitting outside, just to be in an outside area, and she was kind of, I think, one of those people. So I ended up asking her. I said, what happened to, what's her name? And she told me, and she said that she ended up dying of a drug overdose, and that she was moving the house. But she had died. She said she died about 10 years ago, Hector. She died of a drug overdose. But anyway, I began to tell her that I found out that, I had a different biological father, and I said, my sister, I didn't even know that lived here, never knew she was my sister that lived right next door. And I'm finding out this information that my mom was triplets, Julian was identical twins, and Marco was identical twins. It makes me think sometimes that I know if Marco was a triplet. Is it possible Marco's a triplet? I don't know. I know he's twins for sure, but is there a third one? I don't know. So anyway, that was it. So I thought I'd share this video that my biological father, I think, came from that house. But I don't know. It's kind of sketchy because I'm like 50-50 or about 60%. I'm about 60% sure that was him that I saw. Because I was a little kid and I remember he came by. He never grabbed up and hugged me or anything. I don't know if I remember him walking up or my mom was already standing outside, or he was just standing out there and I just saw him and maybe he didn't say anything. I don't remember. But I talk about, if I saw him, I think I saw him once or twice out there, just chilling and talking. And I thought I would make a video on this because he did come by and visit me for a short period of time. I never heard from him again. And it was like a formal greeting, and my dad was kept on telling him, we have the same birthdays. He goes, I was in the Navy. My dad was proving to him that he was worthy of taking care of the child. And, he was sizing him up, and then I remember my dad sitting down on the couch, and this is exactly what my father did. When he was sitting on the couch, he just kind of kept his head down. He'd always do this, he kind of just do that. And he was just sitting down, being an old man. And I went over and sat next to him after my biological father left. And I was just saying, he goes, "You're my dad, right?" Because I was so confused who my dad was. I said, "This guy said he was my dad, but I was calling Raymond Palomo dad already as a kid." So I was like, "Why am I calling like I don't?" I got confused. Like, "You're my dad. I don't know who this guy is, even though it looks like me." I was like, "You're supposed to be." So I sat there. I just walked up and sat real quiet. I go, "You're my dad, right?" Or I don't even know if I said that. I just kind of looked at him. "You're my dad, right?" And he looked at me. He kind of just doing this, and he goes, "How you doing, son?" He was smiling, grinning. He was like, he kind of did this to me. He goes, "How you doing, son?" Like he had just gotten the golden goose to lay a golden egg for him. Like he was real happy. But he kept on trying to prove to my dad, my biological father, that he was worthy of taking care of the kid. And he's like, "We have the same birthday." He goes, "I was in the Navy." And so, and then the rest is history. So, anyway, I thought I'd make a video on that. I don't know if I did see him. Maybe I could have seen him walking up because I was so young. I was so small and so young that it's very vague to me. But I want to say I'm at 60% that I saw him standing over by a car. And maybe it was his car. It was his Honda. I want to say it could have been. Maybe they drove the same kind of car. But he was talking to that guy. And I saw this guy like, it was like 7 or 8 years ago. Because I went there, I think, in two separate occasions. Right after Alaska. And then I went back again when I was like 37 or 38 or somewhere around there. And then they had already moved out. But that lady was already very old. She was like 70 years old. But that old man, there used to be an old man by the name of Joe. Julian knows who he is because Julian used to stand out in the front porch, he'd be lighting up, fucking throwing gasoline and alcohol. We'd be throwing alcohol over the floor and lighting fucking and melting fucking slugs and shit and burning up fire, starting fires and shit. And this guy would sometimes come over, and my dad would be sitting on the front porch. And this is like right after my dad's suicide, and then right before my dad's suicide. And he had come over a couple of times after my dad's suicide, and he stopped coming over because, "Hey, what happened to your dad?" Because he come talk to me sometimes. He goes, "What happened to your dad?" He goes, I talked to your dad and he seemed very lost, like something happened to him." And at that time, my dad would be sitting out in the front porch and he'd be blazing angry. He had an anger that I had never. It wasn't a dispersive, like rate, like mad. It was a type of directed. He was so angry at the circumstances of his life. He was beyond anything I'd ever really seen him when he was just by himself, and he was pissed on how his life ended up being. Like it was almost like I could hear him that I had done so much, and this is what happens to me. You don't know what I went through and he was just sometimes even mumbling to himself. And this is like right after his suicide, and he was on the front porch, and he'd be in his diapers. Sometimes you could see the plastic on the side of his hip, and I couldn't even talk to him. And like I'd look at him, and he was totally zoned out in a way that I'd never seen him before, and he was fucking like he was so angry that like somebody had taken advantage of him, and the circumstances of life. Like I did so much, and you just keep taking from me and stole. Like he was just like, and he was just like looking like, and I knew my father's mental state very well. I knew his mental state before he was drinking, how he was, because my father didn't have friends. He came home, he had activities. By the time I was 4 years old, he had just retired from Texas Instruments, and he was at home all the time. So his activities were always, "Let's go to Brahms, Hector. Come on, let's go to Brahms. Let's go to McDonald's. come on, let's go to Chuck E. Cheese. So we used to go to Chuck E. Cheese all the time, and then we used to go to McBrom's all the time, and we used to go get the car fixed. Do an oil change on the car with Tato or the Asian guy. We used to go to Railroad China all the time when I was a kid. Out near Farmers Branch was just like the most legendary Asian. It was my dad's favorite restaurant. It was like one of his favorite, if not the favorite restaurants. Was a Railroad China restaurant, and it was a hole in the wall, but made the best food. Best food. It was like some immigrant China people, like what you would see in the gutters of the ghettos of China, and, with their saucepan and all like greasy and no fans and hot, and making sesame seeds and frying Mongolian beef. Um, didn't know English very well, but I recall that. I recall that very well, and so I knew his mental state very well. But anyway, I thought I would say something because this guy used to come over. He passed away a long time ago. He was already like 65 years old. I mean, this guy was 70 years old, I'm going to say almost. But they used to have the conversations kind of like making a life review conversation, which was very much like, like that's how life is, everything's changing in the world, we don't have that many years left, what's going to happen, and it was those kind of conversations that you do good in life and just trying to make life, trying to continue living life even at that old age. But I thought I'd make a video on this because I thought it was worth making and talking about. Covered a lot of topics, but I think that was my biological father. I don't know if it was. I know it was a pretty girl over there, and but that she didn't move into that house. She didn't move into that house until I think she was like like maybe 6 years old to 7 years old, because I never saw her until when I was about 10 years, because I'm older than her. I'm older than her by like 2 or 3 years. And when I was about 9 years old to 8 years old, I saw her. So she had to have been about 5. That had already been several years. My fault, 3 or 4 years, I had never seen my biological father again. But that little girl, I always remember thinking to myself, I know it sounds crazy, I was always worried that somebody might touch her. Because if you saw her when she was a kid, she looked like a kid model. She looked like a Toys R Us kid. She looked like a Tyco RC commercial kid. Very beautiful little girl. And I was a couple of years older than her. And I remember she used to wear these skirts. And then she started developing. And I was like, man, that's a pretty girl. She was very pretty, very attractive, very pretty. She started developing. I would not have doubted. But I knew that she grew, to my understanding, when you have parents that send you to an all-girls school, Catholic school of some kind, she went to like a school that was all girls, and it was like a church school as a kid. And when you have parents that do that, you have parents that are very strict. And they're not going to let you just, so I know they took care of her really well. I know they like to protect her. But I was always scared because I was like, that girl's too pretty that somebody can victimize you. Because I knew the lady that lived there was already really old. And then it was that guy that lived there. The guy that lived there was the guy I'm talking about that I saw there. Because he lived in that house for like 20 years. I mean, he lived and paid rent there. He lived at that house like he was part of the family. He lived there for a very long time. Anyway, I thought I'd make a video on this. It's worth looking into. Maybe it was him. I would look into it. Whoever can.